We are hanging out at the Great Mississippi Tea Company. We're having a good cup of tea with tea farmer Timmy, and we're excited to just have a chat about tea. And we're going to come back over the next couple of weeks with a different tea and just talk specifically about each tea. So which tea do we have here today?
So this one is the Black Magnolia. The Black Magnolia was one that we first started off with. So we did our green and our black first. And when it came to trying to figure out what to do with, the Black Magnolia and everything, originally we had a single distributor, which was the Cultured Cup, and we actually had them help us try to figure out naming and all of that kind of stuff. So magnolias are the state of Mississippi's flower. It is our state flower, and it was a black tea. So we decided to go with Black Magnolia. We try to keep everything with our teas relevant to either something to do with the state or the Mississippi River or, our farm or something like that. So that's why we actually named it Black Magnolia to go with our state flower.
Awesome. So for those of you that may not know, we know lots of you are regular followers, but for some of you that may not know, Jason and Timmy own a tea farm in Brookhaven, Mississippi. And how big is this farm now?
So planted, we have 7.5 acres.
7.5 acres, and that would make you the biggest tea farm, right?
Will make us the second largest tea farm in the country, the largest in Mississippi.
Largest in Mississippi, that's right. So that's quite the thing in itself. But we're not talking about that today. We're talking about Black Magnolia tea, but still an amazing thing to understand that this cup of tea was created here on this farm, which is outstanding. And it's not just, it's grown here, but then it's also processed, and that's quite a thing in itself. You do some unique things in your processing. Actually, maybe I'll take a step back. You do unique things just in your harvesting of this tea, don't you?
So our harvester that we have is not one of the normal ones. So most harvesters in the tea world are cutting machines.
Yeah.
So they look like really big hedge trimmers. As where ours is a selective harvester. So it's a plucker, not a cutter. So it actually leaves some of the stuff on the plant that you would have normally cut through with the other harvester. So it gives us the ability to harvest more frequently and actually have less waste as well from that.
Nice. And when you're taking your leaf, do you take, is it what, two leaves in a bud? Is that how that works?
So normally in black tea is 2 leaves in a bud. Ours is 3 leaves in a bud. And that's just because of the chemicals and the enzymes that start in the 3rd leaf. We wanted some of that in our black tea.
Nice. So that's where you kind of get, I think, that distinct Mississippi kind of flavor in this tea. And your flavor is impacted by your region. Like black tea from here is not going to taste the same as black tea from China. Is that right?
Correct.
Interesting.
That's even black tea from our farm will taste completely different than the black tea from, say, Thomas's farm over in Laurel.
Really?
It's because our soil type is different than his soil type. And then what you have in your soil and everything is going to affect your flavor.
Right. And of course, probably processing impacts flavor too.
Yes.
Awesome. Let's take a sip again. We've already taken a sip, but we're going to take another one. Let's just talk about the flavor of this tea. It definitely tastes like, I'm not known at all for my taste buds and my ability to pick up great things, although I'm getting a little bit better. But for me, it definitely tastes like a black tea. So if somebody's like, oh, I don't want anything different than black tea, this definitely tastes like a black tea to me. But there are different notes that come up in it. What comes up in it for you?
So taste in itself is really subjective because there are some things that people are not able to smell and able to taste. It's just a genetic predisposition. But so they may actually connect it differently. But one of the major notes that we usually get out of it, and most people do too, is almost like a sweet potato kind of flavor. And it's kind of that first note that you get. But then, there's a sweetness that's there, and it's due to camphorol that's in our soil and our iron that's in our soil that makes the tea produce the chemical camphorol. And we have such large amounts of it, our tea produces large amounts of it. The problem with camphorol with that as well is it also inhibits or prohibits oxidation completely. So not really the oxidation, but the color change, we'll put it that way. So our black tea is not as dark as a lot of black teas that most people have. And in the beginning, a lot of people were like, oh no, it's more like an oolong. And it's like, but it's not. It was processed as a black tea.
Yeah.
It's just some black teas. I mean, take Darjeeling. I mean, they have a wonderful black tea that really kind of tastes a lot like more an oolong, but it's a black. And people love that.
What determines, like for us, non-experts in the tea, what determines that it's black?
Your process.
Okay.
So even if your cup color is not the same, we did a black tea process.
Okay.
And we even so we were working with someone who was trying to do some little cubes and everything. And he was having issues with our tea, and he thought it was one thing. And so he called Virginia Lovelace, and we got them in contact with each other, and he found out that it was not what he thought it was. It was actually that our tea was fully oxidized, and the polyphenol chains were causing him issues because of the full oxidation. But if you look at our cup of tea, as you can tell, it's not that reddish kind of color that most people know of in black tea. It's more of a brown. And they're like, oh, your tea's not completely oxidized. And it's like, no, it actually is. It's just because of the chemicals and everything that the plant creates because of our soil.
Okay, got it. And what if it wasn't fully oxidized? What would that mean?
So most of the time what happens is somebody will not roll their tea long enough. And then they just don't get the cell disruption that they need. Or they put it to do the oxidation step, and the conditions are not right for oxidation to happen completely in the amount of time they need. Or sometimes they just don't oxidize long enough.
Interesting. All right, what else do we need to know about black tea? I did see somebody comment on Facebook that they got pecan notes in it. And look at the Canadian in the crowd did not say pecan.
No.
Pecan.
Pecan. Yes, in the South, we fight with, back and forth about is it pecan or is it pecan? And in the South, we do not call it a pecan, and there is a good reason for that. So, in olden days, you had chamber pots.
Yeah.
And in the South, they were called pecans.
Oh,
because
boy.
that was the can that you kept in your bedroom for pee and all that stuff.
Yeah, yeah.
They were pecans. You do not eat pecans. So they are pecans.
Pecans.
And when you say pecan, that's where our minds go to.
Yeah.
Is you're talking about a chamber pot. So.
And pecans, they're certainly available in Canada. I've had pecans, but they're definitely something more, they're bigger out here. Like people love their pecan desserts. There's a whole pecan season, so that's something that's kind of unique to the South, I think. Yes. But when I came down here, I was very commonly said the pecans.
Pecan.
Learned very quickly. Pecans, Jolene,
Yeah,
pecans.
And we'll tell you, no, it's a pecan. And people will go back and forth. It just depends on, where they're from and if they're going to just, keep going.
Yeah.
But most of the time people will be like, okay, and they'll just let it go. And, but we are in the South. We'll tell you, it's not pecan.
You know what they say to me?
Pecan.
This is what they say to me when I'm not saying it anymore, but when I was, that was like, oh, bless her heart.
Yeah, that is the South's way of making a jab
Yeah.
politely.
I've had lots of those.
It is not a term of endearment.
Oh, no,
That
no.
most people think. It
Yeah.
is not.
Yeah.
It is kind of a jab.
Yeah.
Especially when you have the little old ladies.
Yeah.
Because it's always a stab and then a bless your heart. So, you know, would you look what she's wearing, bless her heart? You know, there's always a jab or something that comes before it usually. Or if they just really don't have something to say, they'll just have this look on their face and they'll be like, bless their heart. I mean, so it is what it is.
Yeah, that's right. So with this, now the original point was this is somebody on your Facebook actually said that pecan flavor is in this tea. Now, I don't disagree. Like, I kind of feel like I get that.
So it's most people will pick up a nutty.
Yeah.
And once again, it's your recollection of that flavor.
Mm-hmm.
And in the South, where pecans are prevalent and everything else, a lot of people will say the nuttiness is pecan.
Got it.
In other parts of the country where walnuts are more prevalent and stuff like that, they may actually say walnut.
Yeah.
Because that's just the nut that they're used to. So it just really depends on where you're from, because your memory and your experiences in life affect your taste and your smell. And it's the same, I mean, everything in our world is a perception, by our perception or somebody else's. And that's like even color, you know, they got named, you know, what if blue was actually called green? I mean, it's just the name somebody gave it in the beginning. So it's our perception of what that is.
Talking more about your tea, when you started making this tea, like, I'm just trying to imagine you being brand new Timmy to tea. I know you definitely like, you guys did a lot of research. You really went out to learn. You spent time all over the place trying to learn about tea. But when you made your first rounds of tea, like, to get to this, like, how many times did you have to make this to get it right?
So our first year that we actually processed, we probably did over 50 batches of black and green. So over 100 batches in total, to get what we wanted for our black and our green. So with black tea, you have, of course, your withering step, you have your rolling, you have your oxidation, and you have your drying. And each one of those aspects, depending on what you do, can change your flavor. So if you only oxidize for a certain amount of time, you know, you may have either not gone long enough to allow chemical reactions to happen, or you went too short or too long and got rid of some of those flavors, you know, and stuff like that. And then in rolling, you cannot roll long enough. You can roll too far and actually kind of destroy your leaf. And then oxidation, do you do it in open air? Do you do it naturally? Do you control it? You know, how do you do that? How long do you do it? You know, all of this stuff affects it. So we do a controlled oxidation, where we actually do it in a cabinet. They do have them in the tea world. They're called oxidation cabinets. We use a bread proofer. It does the same thing.
Wow.
And we actually figured out that we needed to do what most people would call a heated oxidation, which is not that hot. It's around 100 degrees. And in most places where they do outdoor oxidation and stuff like that, it's regularly, you know, 90s, 100. I mean, so it's not any different. And then our humidity we can control and keep between 85 and 100%. And then the time that we do it, we had to figure out, so with oxidation in black tea, you either get it done quickly, which is basically within 5 hours, or you go really long, like 24 hours. The problem with 24 hours is you get rid of a lot of your theaflavins because they turn into theorubigens, which is the red color.
Those are big words.
Yeah. And your theaflavins is where a lot of your flavor is, of course, per the name. And if you change those, then you end up with kind of more of a one-note tea. So there's no depth.
Okay, I think that's the one that has been interesting to me in the past, is this bit about the one-note tea. So can a person get a one-note tea? Would you want a one-note tea?
I mean, you can get one. Anybody that really does a really long oxidation, you're pretty much going to have a one-note tea because you've gone through and done so much chemical change that you've just about taken the leaf down to where it's starting. I mean, as soon as you pluck it, it starts decomposition. But at that point, you've now killed the leaf completely. When you've done the rolling and everything else, you've killed it. And there's still some things going on chemically, but decomposition starts to happen rapidly. So the longer you go, the more decomposition happens. And from that decomposition, you're getting rid of things. So you can also produce foul flavors in long oxidation if you don't do it properly.
Like bitterness?
Like bitters and sours, and it's the same thing like, you know, animals. Right when they first die, they don't smell. Give them 24 hours and come back, and guess what? They stink.
I don't know that I want to compare tea to animals.
So, I know. I mean, that is, most people will understand that.
Yeah.
You know, and, you know, same thing with, you know, other vegetables and everything else that compost.
Yes.
And all of that.
Okay.
When
Compost,
you know, you put them in there, they will start to smell.
Yeah, that's right. That's right.
So, and that's the same thing with tea. It'll sour. You'll start getting foul flavors and smells and stuff like that. So you've got to know how long and everything else.
Yeah.
And the only way that you know to do that is to figure it out by trials.
And which you had lots of. You had lots.
Yeah, we had lots of trials.
Do you remember your first sale?
So our first sale, I do remember. We actually, our first year that we made tea, we didn't sell any.
Really?
Because we did a adopt a tea plant program. And that program, as soon as tea was available, everybody that had done the adopt a tea program got an allotment of tea based on how many plants they had adopted. All the way up to businesses that, you know, adopted 100 plants.
Wow.
So they got like a pound or a kilo, or I forget the thing, but they got a lot of tea.
Yeah.
So our first sellable tea went to all of that, plus some.
Wow.
So our next season, we finished that out and then started selling tea. But yeah, our first sale, like I said in the beginning, was we had one distributor, and it was the Cultured Cup.
Nice. And they're still with you today?
They're still with us today.
Awesome.
And we still have the same original arrangement with them. They're the only ones that have that arrangement because they were the only ones in the beginning. So
good.
We still do that arrangement with them and everything, and they're still an integral part of our business.
Culture Cup is out of where?
They're in Dallas.
Dallas. Okay, so you have this great map of all your businesses, and you're certainly spotted all up this side of the country doing very, very well. We need to get you out there on the other side of the country a bit more. So if you guys are out there and you know small businesses that need tea, we need to get over like California side, Arizona side, that kind of thing. But nice that you're in like Culture Cup or with Culture Cup in Texas. I think that's the only one in Texas, so isn't it? I think it is.
I think so. I think the Cultured Cup is the only one in Texas. Yeah. But
you've got quite a few
like
in
you
Mississippi.
Said, we've got quite a few in Mississippi. We actually have, I have a new one that I need to give you as well.
Oh, really? Yes.
They made an order this past week.
I'm a visual person, and that map, to me, I just want to see a dot in every state. Like, I want to, you know how people get campers? You got Harvest Host guests that come here all the time. On the back of a camper, they'll have these maps, and it's all the little places that they visited, and they'll fill in the states of the places they visited on this sticker on their campers. Well, our map is online, and I'm like, I want little stickers, little GMTC signs in every state. I just think it's precious to think of this company that is such a small business, a small farm. I think it would be so precious to be able to say one day they're in every single state. So I don't know, I'm a goal girl, you know, I like those types of things. But
And goals are good.
Yep.
And it may never happen. I mean,
No, it may not,
but it's a good goal to have, to be in every state.
Better than no goals.
That's right.
Yeah, you know. We've nailed Mississippi, although we're never going to turn down. Like if anybody's like, oh, I'm already in Mississippi, we would be thrilled to be in any business.
Anywhere.
Well, I would say in most businesses. We might not fit into every culture, but we would be thrilled to be in a business in any, you know, anybody who fits with our mold, I guess, in a sense. But
Yes.
And who has tea? Who needs tea? What's interesting, actually, when talking about businesses and tea, is one thing that we don't really, people may not think of, is that it's not just for retail and reselling. It would be good in businesses that are like health orientated, that are like maybe spas or offer kind of different services.
That is one. So we have a local one that I'm working on right now, and they're friends of ours.
Yep.
And they have a health spa.
Yeah.
And they wanted, they've been asking about, you know, carrying some teas, but they want them to be spa teas.
Yeah.
And I have several that I did back when I first started blending. And that was Joe Johnson was my blending teacher. And that's the blends that I created in the beginning. She was like, these are what are considered spa teas because they were relaxing and soothing and everything else. So she was like, those you could sell as a spa tea, and people would buy them for health purposes, you know, in these particular businesses. So yes, we also do custom blends and everything as well, which is a whole nother story. But
now your comment's going to create a questions, I'm sure, for the followers, is if you do these spa teas, will you make them available for them as well?
Yes.
Awesome. I'm sure that would interest some other folks as well.
So we do things too where we do trials. Well, I'll do certain blends, tea blends or tea soaps or, you know, whatever, and we'll pick a particular business that we're already working with or about to be working with, and we'll trial them. And we'll see, are these actually going to be popular? You know, what do people think? And sometimes they're just not that popular. And we just do away with them. So that's another aspect of our business that a lot of people also don't see, is I'm not putting something out to everybody without at least trying some things first. Now there are like our Christmas blend and all that stuff, you know, I make them special every year, which is something that's coming up and we're starting to work on. And
pumpkin spice.
yeah, we got that the holiday tea that will be released this weekend.
I'm the big pumpkin spice fan, so that's yeah. And lots of people don't like pumpkin spice, but I cannot wait for it. It gets me super excited. The flavors, like I'm that person that cannot wait to just sit down and take in the flavors of fall. So I'm excited about that. But we won't get caught up in that. We'll do that in a separate video. But so yeah, a lot of effort goes into making sure the flavors are, you know, are what people want. You know, the quality. Like you really do work so hard at quality, both just in kind of your trials. And you and Jason have this very natural, like even if you have dinner at their house, everything tastes delicious. They have taste buds, and this is where they differ from me. Like I am not a person with great taste buds. I'm just like, it tastes the same, you know, but I can taste something when it tastes really good, and I know that when I have dinner at their house. But that taste gets applied to their product. So when you taste their product, you know that they've put in that effort. They've really sat down and thought that through and gone, I don't like this little tiny thing. And then they've worked on it and changed it. So I think that's in the quality of your tea.
Yeah.
And your processing. Like that's how you've done it through processing and through your harvesting and stuff like that. So.
And I do know there are some, this is one thing that I do know, there are people that understand, but there are people out there that don't as well. So, especially last year. So we went through a really bad drought last year. And because of that, the tea at one point just completely stopped growing because it was just too hot.
Yeah.
And the tea itself, when it does kick back on, and it's actually just growing way too slow because there's no humidity, because there's no rain, and there's nothing we can do to supplement humidity. They would get what's called hardened off faster, so the stem would start to stiffen up by the time they actually crept up to grow the way we needed them to be able to harvest. So last year we did have a little bit more stem in our tea because we just couldn't help it. There was nothing we could do about it. So last year there was quite a bit more stem in our tea. It was more stemmy. But one of the things with stem is people will say, oh, they've put in the stem in this tea because they're trying to jip me on my weight of the tea. You know, I have sorted out by hand a lot of stem before. And out of a 5,000 gram batch, when you looked at it, the stem looked just like unbelievable. I'm like, bad stem, like bad stemmy. And so I would sit there and I'd pick it out till, you know, it was at least decent. And there were still a little bit left, but not a lot. And I had a big pot, I had a bowl full of stem. And when I weighed it, out of a 5,000 gram batch, I had maybe 80 grams. Stem once it's dry weighs nothing.
Really?
It really does. So they're not adding it in there for weight. Stem does have flavor.
I was going to say, you've just played with a new tea. And
there are stem teas out there.
Yeah, I was going to say, stem does have flavor.
It does have flavor. Actually, a lot more of your stone fruit and kind of nutty notes are in your stem. That's where they're the most prevalent. So when you get a tea that does have stem in it, think about that. Maybe, you know, like it was like us last year. You know, there was some climate condition that they couldn't control, and they ended up with more stem in their tea, especially smaller farms. Bigger companies, like in China and stuff like that, have machines that sort all of that out. And when we do our new factory, we will have what's called a color sorter, and it will get rid of all of that for us, and we won't have to worry about it anymore. But we do still end up with a little bit of stem in our tea, and it's just natural. And most tea people understand, you know, okay, this is just part of it in some cases, and especially oolongs. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, I don't see stem when I get the little balls and stuff like that. And it's like, well, yeah, because most of that has been taken out by that balling process. But when you steep those balls, the jasmine pearls, which is normally a green, or, you know, like a milk oolong or something like that. If you steep it and you open that up, you will still find pieces of stem in there. It's just you can't see them because they're all rolled up.
and this is interesting because this is quite enlightening for me, because it's almost like an education thing with stems. Because a lot of people were used to tea bags, okay? We're used to dust in our tea, which is not nearly as good a quality as, you know, a full leaf, especially a leaf that's kind of harvested so soon. And, it loses its flavor over time. So we might just be like, as a consumer, we're just not used to stems because we're
Yeah.
getting such a unique product, really, in general. Like, you're coming straight
Yeah.
from the farm.
Well, and that's the thing in tea bags too, is it doesn't mean that there's not stem in there.
Yeah,
Just means you
absolutely.
can't tell that there's stem in there
Yeah,
because it's been
yeah.
shredded and crushed up into what you see in that tea bag.
Yeah.
So, I mean, they do, I mean, even in the commodity world, they still do static rollers and stuff like that because the stem itself is lighter than the tea, and it will pick that up through the static rolling.
Yeah.
So it does still, they still go through a lot of that, but a lot of that is the bigger pieces that didn't actually shred up.
Yeah.
So there's still stem even in your tea bag,
Yeah.
which in most cases, they've done a lot better job over the last few years, but I can remember when I was little how bitter a tea bag tea could be. And that's when we learned how to, my grandmother taught us, you know, you put a little tiny pinch of baking soda.
Yeah. Or didn't we do the salt thing?
And the salt thing.
We have
yep,
a video
did
on
that.
this. We tested that salt thing. No issues to flavor. It just,
No.
it was fine.
Because that was the thing with that too, is most people wanted to say, oh, they're putting they're thinking a spoon or a teaspoon. It's like,
Yeah.
no, it is literally like a couple of granules of salt.
Yeah.
You're like,
Yeah.
and that's, I mean, just barely, not even really a pinch.
Yeah.
It's like a tidbit.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, awesome, Timmy. This was really great. This was so enlightening about black tea. For those of you that have not tried the Black Magnolia Black Tea, it is definitely a top seller for you guys, a very popular tea. It's in a lot of the blended teas as well. So go on, head out online. What's your website?
Yeah, greatmstcompany.com.
There you go. So head out online if you haven't tried it today, or one of the other great teas that are out there. Thanks you guys so much for watching.